We're starting with one of the greatest capital allocators of all time, Warren Buffett, and how he basically operationalizes courtesy through trust.
Let's do it.
So, to really understand the economic power of character, we have to start with one of the great Buffett anecdotes, one that feels, utterly counterintuitive to the world of high finance.
The purchase of the Nebraska Furniture Mart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Back in 1983.
And it's counterintuitive because it highlights the absence of the typical acquisition process. When you picture a multi-million-dollar deal with a titan like Buffett, you picture months of due diligence,
Right.
dozens of lawyers, auditor reports, data rooms sealed off like, I don't know, bank vaults.
For sure. But if you walked into the Nebraska Furniture Mart in Omaha, it didn't look like that at all. It wasn't some polished corporate headquarters. It was just this one single massive location.
Right.
But somehow it moved more volume in furniture, carpet, appliances, more than all of its local competitors combined.
And the sources describe the atmosphere as feeling almost like a high-stakes but totally transparent negotiation.
Yeah, and that incredible volume was a direct result of their culture. It wasn't some proprietary tech or complex financial wizardry.
Yeah.
It was relentless, straight-shooting honesty and respect from the founder, Rose Blumkin, or Mrs. B.
She basically enforced this invisible social contract with the community that had compounded for decades.
What was it?
It was simple. We won't play games with you. We won't cheat you. We will always give you the best price. Straight up. That's it.
And Mrs. B herself was the proof of concept. I mean, when Buffett purchased the company, she was 90 years old.
Yeah.
And still on the floor 7 days a week, often making sales herself. And Buffett had been observing her operations for decades, not secretly, but just watching how the business operated in the local economy and how its reputation held up year after year.
And this focus on small, daily proofs of character is so central to the strategy. It's about the little things. How does a cashier handle a difficult return?
Mm-hmm.
How patient is a salesperson when a customer is clearly just browsing for the third time?
Mm.
Do managers back their employees when they're trying to uphold the store's values, or do they immediately hide behind bureaucracy?
Right.
These mundane interactions, they become the data points for a sophisticated investor like Buffett.
And Mrs. B's own origin story just cements why this trust was so absolute. She opened the Mart in 1937 with $500. When she was squeezed early on by these bigger retailers who tried to block her supply lines, she fought them tooth and nail. But the pivotal detail, the one that really proved her character beyond any doubt, was what she did when her resources ran out.
What was it?
She sold furniture and appliances directly out of her home to pay her creditors exactly as promised.
Okay, that's incredible. That level of scrupulous honor, especially under that kind of duress, when the easiest thing to do would have been to just default or delay.
Right.
That is an unparalleled investment in your reputation. It signaled to everyone she interacted with, my word is absolute, even if it cost me personal sacrifice.
So, cut to 1983. Mrs. B is ready to sell 90% of the Mart to Berkshire Hathaway. And this is the part that just blows the minds of Wall Street analysts.
Right.
Buffett, who had admired the family and the business for years, didn't need complex 6-month audits or heavy legal wrestling.
He literally wrote that the deal was quickly made.
Yeah.
We're talking about a $55 million-plus majority sale based essentially on a handshake and a brief contractual document.
The speed was the strategy.
Exactly. Buffett wasn't just buying furniture inventory. He was buying a known quantity of impeccable character. And that allowed him to bypass the most expensive, time-consuming part of M&A, validating integrity.
So let's talk about the quantifiable value of that speed. I mean, in modern M&A, the diligence period is often a war of attrition, right?
Oh, completely. It costs millions in legal and consulting fees, months of executive time, and you're always running the risk that the deal falls apart or market conditions change. So when Buffett says, we've never succeeded in making a good deal with a bad person, it sounds a little moralizing, but it is pure economics. It's a performance claim tied directly to this concept of transaction costs.
Okay, break down transaction costs for us in this context.
Sure. Transaction costs are all the non-price expenses that go with a deal. So the time spent negotiating, the legal fees for writing these heavy defensive contracts,
Right.
and the ongoing costs of monitoring and enforcing that contract. If you partner with a bad or disrespectful person, they inherently increase these costs exponentially.
Because you have to assume the worst. You have to hedge against their potential lack of honor.
Precisely. You have to spend millions on lawyers writing heavier contracts to mitigate risks like adverse selection, which is just choosing the wrong partner, and moral hazard.
Which is,
The risk that once the deal is signed, they change their behavior and prioritize their own self-interest over the partnership. So even if you technically win the deal against a bad partner, you pay in extreme stress, constant distraction, and time lost cleaning up reputational messes.
and those costs compound.
They compound, taking energy and focus away from actual profitable growth.
So politeness, which is really just consistent, respectful behavior, acts as a screening tool. It's a signaling system that reveals the operating system beneath the hood before you commit capital.
It's a massive risk reducer. When you are gracious under pressure, when you treat the small people well, the vendors, the assistants, the service staff, that consistency signals integrity. It attracts people who value long-term relationships, and it repels those who seek only short-term exploitation.
So the wealth lesson here is just unambiguous. Your manner are not separate from your strategy. They are your strategy. Because trustworthy relationships are the real leverage that accelerates growth and reduces risk.
So, if we want to translate this high-level strategy into actionable microsteps today, where do we start?
Well, first, I love your point about shifting the mindset. You have to stop treating the deal like a hunt to exploit maximum value.
Yes. Start negotiations by clearly naming shared aspirational goals. Instead of leading with demands, you could try something like, I want this process to be fast, fair, and ensure dignity is preserved for everyone involved because we are aiming for a 10-year partnership, not a one-off transaction.
That sets a profoundly different tone, just immediately.
It does. Second, analyze your own payment habits. Pay fast and stop nitpicking over pennies that cost you goodwill. If you are financially capable, paying vendors early is one of the highest leverage acts of courtesy. Haggling over a tiny 2% discount on an invoice when you're dealing with a strategic partner, it just destroys the relationship capital you've built over years. It's a self-defeating move that signals nickel and diming is your priority.
And the third tool, which is more of an external visibility check, is observing and controlling how you treat non-decision makers.
Oh, this is absolutely crucial. The way you interact with the gatekeepers, the assistants, the juniors, the people who hold little formal power over the transaction, that becomes the way decision makers assume you'll treat them later once the contract is signed.
Wow.
It reveals whether your courtesy is a performance or if it's your true default operating system. And in the long run, wealth follows the people who make partnership feel safe and low friction. And that safety is earned with consistent respect.
Okay, so if Buffett shows us how courtesy accelerates acquisitions and lowers external risk, Mary Kay Ash shows us how it accelerates people and builds this fierce internal loyalty. We're moving from the high finance of Omaha to the strategic use of recognition in Dallas.
Yeah, and the story starts in 1963. Mary Kay Ash opened her company with $5,000 in savings and the help of her 20-year-old son, Richard Rogers.
Right.
And she wasn't just starting a cosmetics company. She was reacting against decades of frustration she felt in the male-dominated corporate world where women's achievements were just rarely recognized or rewarded.
So she fundamentally redesigned what success felt like for the women building the business. This source material really emphasizes that she was selling dignity and visible acknowledgement as much as she was selling skincare.
And that focus immediately led her to operationalize recognition. It wasn't just a vague idea. Within a year, she launched the annual seminar tradition. And here's where the detail is just so illustrative. The earliest version was tiny, maybe 200 attendees, squeezed into a 500-square-foot warehouse. And Mary Kay Ash herself was in the back, cooking chicken for them.
I love that detail. Can you just imagine the pressure? You're cooking for the sales force that represents your entire future. That's not just politeness. That's sheer commitment to the human element.
Most founders, as they scale, they unconsciously drift away from the messy human part.
Yeah, they do.
They stop remembering names, they shake fewer hands, they outsource the thank yous, and they justify it by saying, I'm too busy managing growth.
Right.
Mary Kay moved in the opposite direction. She institutionalized the thank you. Recognition was not a mood for her. It was a system built on repetition and culture.
And this system scaled so quickly into these massive visible rewards. Jewelry, expense-paid trips, mink coats, and of course the famous pink Cadillacs, which began in 1969.
And this is often where people start to challenge the strategy, right? They say, but isn't the pink Cadillac program just an expensive, flashy gimmick? Doesn't that kind of reward feel manipulative or worse, financially unsound?
That's the critical question, isn't it? How do you ensure it reads as genuine courtesy and not just transactional manipulation?
It's because of the foundation. The sources showed that the key is balancing these visible rewards with deep, individualized respect. The point wasn't primarily the car's monetary value. The point was the message the car carried. In the 1960s, a pink Cadillac, driven by a woman in a town, signaled, "We see you. Your work counts. You matter here." It made success visible, which motivated others to believe they could achieve it too.
And this highlights the core strategic principle we identified earlier, the powerful contrast between attract versus extract.
Exactly. Extracting means pushing harder, treating employees as replaceable inputs, and just optimizing for short-term gain. Mary Kay modeled attracting, earning fierce loyalty, deepening trust, and building a reputation that literally pulls talent and opportunities towards you.
Right.
And politeness and visible acknowledgement are the highest return tools in that attract toolkit because they address the fundamental human need to feel significant.
And Mary Kay's epigraph just perfectly captures the constant battle against that default corporate habit. No matter how busy you are, you must take time to make the other person feel important.
Busyness is truly the greatest enemy of courtesy. It gives leaders this easy excuse to treat people like speed bumps or transactional inputs. Mary Kay built specific mechanisms, the seminar, the specific reward tiers, the focus on individualized recognition, that specifically thought that natural drift away from human connection that success so often introduces.
So what's the loyalty multiplier here? What does this systematic courtesy deliver strategically?
Well, when people feel genuinely important and seen, they don't just put in the minimum effort. They become brand defenders. They stay longer, which reduces turnover costs, a huge drain on profitability.
Huge.
They refer others who already understand the culture. And crucially, they bring you opportunities, new ideas, warnings about problems, because they trust you won't embarrass or dismiss them.
So the wealth lesson is critical. When you scale your business, you must also scale respect and recognition, or you'll slowly poison the foundational relationships your entire success depends on. You can't delegate true, specific recognition.
Exactly. So how do we apply this in a non-cosmetics business? How do we scale respect today?
I think we have to move beyond just generic acknowledgments.
Absolutely. You need to practice name plus specific praise. Generic praise, great job, team, sales were up. It feels cheap and it's easily forgotten. But specific praise feels true because it requires effort and attention. For example, Aisha, your calm recap during the budget section, specifically pulling those 3 key risk metrics, kept the meeting productive and on track. That saved us an hour.
That level of detail shows you are actually paying attention, which is the highest form of respect.
It is. And the second critical tool is the protocol for handling failure. You give credit in public, but you always deliver corrections and tough feedback in private.
Always.
Protecting an individual's dignity is the currency of loyalty. You want people to feel safe enough to try difficult, ambitious things and even fail, knowing that if correction is needed, it will be delivered discreetly and with respect for their potential.
And if they feel safe failing,
they will try harder and innovate faster.
Money grows faster when people feel valued, not used. That's a theme that just runs through all these sources.
It really is.
Okay, so we've established that courtesy builds trust with Buffett and loyalty with Mary Kay. Now we need to address the hardest part. How do you maintain exceptionally high standards without resorting to cruelty or sharp intensity? And for that, we move from the sales floor to the restaurant floor with Danny Meyer, founder of Union Square Cafe and Shake Shack.
And this is the critical junction where most leaders fail the courtesy test. They just assume that high standards must come packaged with intensity, a loud voice, sarcasm, public callouts.
Right.
But Meyer's insight was that you can enforce the highest standards with the softest, most consistent hands.
The famous salt shaker lesson is the perfect anecdote to illustrate this. It takes place in New York City, late 1980s. Meyer is still new to running Union Square Cafe, and he's deeply frustrated.
What's he frustrated about?
Standards are slipping, forks are misaligned, service is hurried, details are missed. He feels like he's constantly fighting this rearguard action against entropy.
So he's venting this frustration to an old established pro, Pat Setta, the owner of Sparks Steakhouse. Meyer is exhausted from constantly reminding his staff and feels, personally defeated by the room's tendency to just drift toward average.
That's when Setta performs this incredible teaching moment. He scripts a nearby table, leaving only the salt shaker.
Okay.
He asks Meyer to center it perfectly, then repeatedly. Setta intentionally shoves the salt shaker 3 inches off center, forcing Meyer to recenter it over and over and over again.
It's a brilliant, simple lesson because it bypasses all the emotional baggage. Setta's blunt affection revealed the truth. Your staff and your guests will always move the salt shaker off center.
Always.
That's not sabotage. That's human entropy. That's life under pressure. The manager's job isn't to get angry at the drift. The job is simply to move it back every single time without fail, without frustration.
The rage isn't the solution. The repetition is. This is politeness as a scaling strategy.
Absolutely. Early success can often come from intensity. You push harder, you work longer hours, you demand compliance. But when you try to scale that system, the intensity fractures the culture.
Right.
If your system requires every manager to be perpetually angry or demanding, your turnover skyrockets and your team spends more time trying to manage your mood than manage the standards.
So high standards demand soft hands. The salt shaker is centered by repetition, not by shouting.
Exactly. And Meyer adopted this philosophy, which he named constant gentle pressure. This means correction must be frequent, predictable, and delivered with an assumption of good faith rather than an assumption of malice or incompetence.
Let's dig into the psychology there. What is the operational difference between correcting with contempt versus correcting with dignity?
Well, when correction feels like contempt, sarcasm, public shaming, or treating the sake as a personal offense, people immediately work defensively.
Oh.
They hide mistakes, they deflect blame, and they stop taking initiative. You get short-term compliance, but you lose long-term trust and innovation.
And when correction feels like respect?
When correction feels like respect and clarity, like the manager and the employee are on the same team, jointly fighting entropy people bring problems to you faster. They try again sooner. They become proactive learners.
And that builds a culture that can handle growth and stress without just collapsing into defensiveness.
Yes.
The wealth lesson is so powerful here. Be precise without being cruel, so your standards can survive the natural stresses of scaling and human error.
Okay, so let's give the listener some operational tools for applying this constant gentle pressure to their own standards.
First, I think you have to shift the focus from the person's flaw to the standard itself.
Right. Name the standard, not the flaw. Instead of saying, why did you send me this report with those errors? You did it wrong. You say, here's what great looks like for this report. We need to hit these 3 formatting benchmarks every time.
That shifts the focus from a personal attack to a collective goal of excellence.
Exactly. And then you apply the recenter script.
The recenter script.
Yeah, you use it calmly and frequently. So if a team member cuts corners, you don't need a massive intervention. You just calmly say, not quite. That's the standard. Let's put it back where we want it. You repeat calmly, knowing that entropy is inevitable.
Can you give another example?
Sure. If a customer service rep is too brief on the phone, you might say, that handled the issue, but let's remember the standard is to also end the call by asking if there's anything else we can do for them. Let's recenter that process.
So the goal is just predictability and emotional neutrality. You're making the standard the stable thing, not the manager's mood.
And crucially, you end every correction with belief. You say, I'm pushing this because I know you can hit it, and I know this team is capable of this level of excellence. That links the specific correction to the person's long-term potential, cementing their dignity and their loyalty. You move the salt shaker back, you center the standards, without breaking the table or the team member's spirit.
Okay, so if the last segment was about maintaining standards internally, this one is about turning courtesy into an external competitive advantage that reshapes an entire business model.
Right.
We're looking at Tony Hsieh and Zappos in the early 2000s.
And Zappos, this fast-growing online shoe retailer based in San Francisco, faced a thoroughly unglamorous problem. Customers called them constantly.
All the time.
Because buying shoes online was still relatively new and kind of anxiety-provoking, the call volume was immense. Questions about sizing, returns, shipping, just general confusion.
And that high volume of mandatory customer interaction forced a critical strategic choice, which Hsieh described as a life-changing decision made over fajitas at a Chevy's Mexican restaurant.
The problem was multifaceted. They recognized that outsourced, distant customer service was cheap, but it destroyed brand trust.
Of course.
But within San Francisco, they couldn't find staff who were committed to customer service as a long-term career. The high cost of living meant that kind of role was often seen as temporary. And more profoundly, the sources note the upwardly mobile Silicon Valley mentality clashed with the need for dedicated service professionals.
What exactly does that mentality mean in this context?
Well, in that culture, success is often defined by speed, disruption, and rapid pivoting. A career path focused solely on being excellent at patient, human-to-human interaction like handling returns over the phone was often viewed as non-ambitious or not scalable enough.
I see.
It bred impatience and a desire to automate the human out of the system, which was the opposite of what Zappos needed.
So the core strategic insight that emerged was that they couldn't isolate customer service. The call center wasn't a cost center.
The call center was the brand.
Right, the whole brand.
And if you truly believe that, then service must be the primary, consistent experience across the entire company. The way customers interact with you when they're frustrated, at the point of friction, that has to be a clear, compelling signal of your brand promise.
And this led to the move that looked completely irrational for an internet company at the time, relocating their headquarters from high-tech San Francisco to Las Vegas.
It was an incredible wager. They moved to a 247 hospitality city where service and interaction are core to the local economic rhythm and the talent pool.
Oh.
Zappos made a conscious choice to put their headquarters where dedicated, warm service talent was abundant.
The wager was basically, we will compete on courtesy so consistently that it becomes our marketing.
Exactly. You know, we often discuss product moats or network effects. This is a deliberate strategy to build a human moat, a competitive barrier based on a culture where kindness, patience, and courtesy are the default behaviors, even under extreme stress.
Sure.
They were betting that this consistent dignity would be harder for competitors to copy than any technological feature.
So let's detail the 3 profitable functions of courtesy at scale that emerged from this move.
Okay, first, courtesy creates trust, precisely at the point of friction, during complaints, returns, or shipping confusion. These are the moment customers decide if you were a transactional commodity or a long-term relationship. And Zappos famously told their customer service reps to take as long as necessary on calls, even if they weren't buying anything, prioritizing that human connection over arbitrary time metrics.
Second, it dramatically improves talent acquisition.
By moving the mission where the talent was, they attracted the right people. They selected specifically for humility and warmth. They didn't just hire technical aptitudes, they hired emotional aptitudes, which are really the engine of courtesy.
And third, it turns reputation into profitable growth.
This is the hard economic proof. The Harvard Business Review confirmed that Zappos' growth was driven overwhelmingly by repeat customers and word of mouth, not expensive acquisition marketing.
So their service wasn't a cost center.
It was their most effective growth driver. It made courtesy strategically expensive in the good way because it costs time and attention,
Right.
but it pays back in loyalty.
And this all hinges on Shea's non-negotiable filter for hiring, he said. There are a lot of really smart, talented people out there that are also really egotistical. We won't hire them.
And that is the essential back-end infrastructure of courtesy. Ego makes courtesy fragile and conditional. When things get difficult, the egotistical person wants someone to blame,
Right.
either the customer or a coworker. The humble person wants to solve the problem and restore dignity. That cultural tax of ego is just too high for a service company to pay. In crowded markets, being good is table stakes. Being courteous at scale is rare. And rarity, when it comes to human connection, is strategically invaluable.
So if we want to build that humble moat today, what are the first steps?
First, you have to make courtesy a hiring requirement, not just an aspiration. Implement screening methods, behavioral interviews, observational exercises that specifically screen for humility and warmth.
You test for it.
You test for it. Test how candidates handle hypothetical situations where they are clearly right, but they need to apologize anyway. Ego is truly a hidden cost center.
And treat every complaint like a brand audition.
Absolutely. The customer who is complaining is already paying you with their attention and their frustration. Don't isolate service to one department. Make it everyone's business. Design your interactions for word-of-mouth retelling, not for winning minor arguments.
So when a customer tells the story of how you handled a return,
You want them to focus on the kindness, not the hassle.
and crucially, you have to ensure your internal metrics reward rather than punish patience and kindness.
Oh, for sure. If you measure customer service reps on call time efficiency, you are explicitly punishing the Zappos strategy. You must reward the time and patience required to solve the problem and build trust. Let your manners do the marketing.
Our final strategic pillar brings us to, I think, the ultimate expression of courtesy, accountability, specifically through the sincere, public, and costly apology. We're heading to JFK, Valentine's Day 2007, for a profound lesson in crisis management.
Yeah, this was the crisis that almost took down a highly respected airline. JetBlue was known as the nice guy of aviation new planes, free TV, good service.
Right.
But a severe ice storm hit the Northeast, and their operations just completely unraveled under the pressure.
We need to paint a vivid picture here of the sheer magnitude of the failure.
Okay, so on Valentine's Day 2007, the storm was so bad that only 17 of 156 scheduled departures left JFK.
Wow.
But the true operational failure wasn't the storm itself. It was the lack of planning for de-icing, for crew logistics, for communication. Customers were stranded for hours, sometimes 8, 10, 12 hours, trapped in planes on the tarmac without food or water.
Just stuck there.
Stuck.
Right.
Unable to disembark due to safety rules, and sometimes even seeing their pilots and crew time out and simply walk away.
Yeah.
The entire operation didn't stabilize until 6 agonizing days later on February 20th.
The standard corporate move when a disaster of this magnitude hits is to engage in damage control, right? Blame the weather, blame regulations, deploy vague PR euphemisms, and hide the CEO until the outrage cools down.
Right. Those defensive maneuvers are designed to protect the legal team and executive embarrassment. But they destroy the reputation. They send a clear, non-verbal message to the customer, which is, your experience and dignity don't matter as much as my corporate image. And David Neeleman, the founder and CEO at the time, chose the exact opposite path. Immediate, polite, and transparent accountability.
He issued a public letter titled An Apology from David Neeleman, which was widely circulated, and he opened without any euphemism or qualification.
And the language was so crucial. He didn't start with, we regret the inconvenience. He started by plainly naming the harm. We are sorry and embarrassed, but most of all, we are deeply sorry. He called it the worst operational week in the airline's history. He fully validated the customer's frustration and anger.
And he did something truly rare in corporate crisis management. He apologized not only to the stranded customers, but also publicly to the JetBlue crew members.
This is a masterstroke of courtesy. He promised them better resources and support, essentially taking responsibility for failing his own team and putting them in an impossible situation. He protected the dignity of the people on the front line who had to face the customer's rage.
But the apology alone isn't the strategy. The hinge moment is the immediate action that followed. This is where courtesy becomes a measurable financial investment.
Yes. Accountability has to convert the apology into measurable, transparent repair. Just 6 days after the meltdown started, JetBlue announced the Customer Bill of Rights. This was a specific, public, repeatable promise tied to compensation for future delays and cancellations, clearly defined and published on their website.
Let's detail how this made the courtesy measurable. What did the Bill of Rights actually promise?
It provided tiered compensation, not just vague vouchers. For minor delays, 30 to 59 minutes, customers would receive a $25 credit. For delays exceeding 4 hours, the customer would receive a full refund plus a travel certificate for the same value. If the flight was canceled due to JetBlue's error, the customer received a full refund and a $150 credit. This was a clear, transparent financial penalty JetBlue imposed on itself.
And the masterstroke of courtesy was that it was made retroactive to cover the Valentine's Day storm impact.
Yes. They didn't just promise courtesy for the future, they compensated for the past failure using the new publicly transparent standard. This combination restores dignity. It tells the customer, you are not crazy for being upset. We see you, we validate your experience, and we will voluntarily pay the cost of our mistake.
And that converts a crisis from a pure financial and reputational loss into a long-term trust investment.
It does. You pay the immediate quantifiable cost, but you buy credibility that no amount of advertising could ever generate.
This requires a total separation of explanation from excuse, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The JetBlue model shows the value of separating the initial act of ownership from the subsequent detailed explanation of why it happened. You explain what happened only after you've fully validated the impact on the customer and accepted responsibility.
So if we break this down, what are the 4 steps of polite accountability that convert crisis into capital?
Based on the JetBlue model, 1, you name the harm plainly and immediately, using human language like sorry and embarrassed. 2, you accept responsibility immediately without excuses first. 3, you respect and protect the front line. Apologize to your staff, too, for failing them with resources. And 4, you make amends in a way people can measure a transparent, retroactive system of compensation.
So for the listener, they need a template for this.
Yeah, draft a simple 3-line template for yourself for any failure, large or small. Impact, ownership, repair. I see what happened and the impact on you. It is entirely on me, Caius. Here is what I will do by when to fix it. Politeness isn't just saying sorry. It's the willingness to pay the cost of being wrong.
So we started by exploring a concept, politeness and courtesy, that is so often relegated to the realm of soft skills. But through this deep dive, we've seen 5 seemingly soft behaviors used by titans of industry to build durable, lasting wealth.
Yeah, we saw Warren Buffett using trust and respect as his primary due diligence and risk screening tool, allowing him to accelerate billion-dollar deals and just reduce those transaction costs. We saw Mary Kay Ash use radical scaled recognition to build this fierce, defensible loyalty that fought the natural cultural drift of busyness.
We saw Danny Meyer center and maintain world-class standards not with cruelty, but with constant, gentle pressure, ensuring his culture could survive the stress of scaling without fracturing.
Right.
And Tony Hsieh moved his entire company to build a humble moat of service that became his most effective, lowest-cost marketing engine.
And finally, David Neeleman converted a complete operational meltdown into a long-term trust investment through polite, measured, and highly costly accountability, the Customer Bill of Rights.
The ultimate takeaway for you, the learner, is this. Politeness isn't compliance, it's consistency. It is the daily, small choice to respect the human on the other side of the transaction. Whether that's a vendor whose contract you're negotiating, a junior staff member who just made a small mistake, or a deeply frustrated customer in a crisis.
And all 5 examples show that the strategic goal of courtesy is to fundamentally lower friction.
Yeah.
Fairness, trust, and dignity. They eliminate the need for defensiveness, for heavy contracts, constant monitoring, and costly damage control.
Yeah.
And that frees up massive time, energy, and resources for actual productive growth. Consistent courtesy reduces your operational risk and increases your relational capital.
So the final maxim we should hold on to, proven across every single segment, is this. Money grows faster when people feel valued, not used.
So here is our final provocative thought for you to chew on and apply to your work. Consider your own golden rule promise for your work. What is the one thing, the transactional lie, the cheap trick, the manipulative leverage point that you will never deploy to win a deal or to save face? And more importantly, what systems can you build today to make that courtesy repeatable and visible, ensuring your manners truly do the marketing? Because if lasting wealth follows the people who make partnership feel safe, what is your business doing right now, today, to make you the safest bet in your entire industry?